Hi everybody. Earlier in the week I shot this still life for a book cover, so I thought what a good opportunity to take two pinhole cameras, my Holga Pinhole and a Zero Image 2000 pinhole, and shoot this and compare the images under highly controlled lighting situations. Here's the setup. You can see it's pretty simple, a little bit different than the cover photo. The light that's on the backdrop is just coming through a window. It's morning light and that'll pass. So I'm thinking I'm going to light this with my Husky LED work light and two Pancake LED lights on the side. Well, here's the two cameras, the Holga Pinhole on the left, of course, and the Zero Image 2000 on the right. Vastly different cameras. On the right, the Zero Image 2000 is made of teak and brass and is very, very well constructed. On the left, the Holga is made of plastic and it's held together with duct tape. Here are two of the lights that I used for the cover photo shoot that I'm also using here. On the left is a Husky work light I got at Home Depot. On the right is a Pancake LED light, which is pretty small. Here's a shot of my Holga Pinhole camera taken almost right after I got it. It's held together with black electrical tape. One thing about Holgas, you're absolutely guaranteed that the back is going to fall off unless you put some tape on it, and it always happens after you've loaded it with film. Well, this is my Holga now, and I've graduated from electrical tape and moved on up to duct tape. Pinhole cameras are absolutely old school. Every single thing is manual on this, so I always have a habit of potentially shooting with the lens cap on and not winding the film after I take a shot. Therefore, I put this little reminder on the back of the camera to do that. Nothing worse than going to some cool location, shooting away with your pinhole, coming home and seeing that your lens cap is on. If you wind up getting one of these things, I really recommend that you put a little note to yourself just like this. Here's the lighting setup. The two Pancake LEDs are angled end to end, and the key light, the Husky LED work light, is off to the right hand side. The door was open on the left, allowing a bunch of natural light to come in. I'm using my Seikonic L308S light meter in incident mode to measure the light that's falling on the still life. You slide the little half dome over the top of the exposure window and then hold the meter up to the subject. I'm also using Ilford HP4 120 film at ISO 125. The Zero Image 2000 has a very handy exposure dial on the back of the camera. You take your reading with a light meter, then look up what your exposure is for 138 on this particular camera. Set the dial to what your light meter said, then look at 138 to get your exposure time. The Holga has an F value of 192, not 138, so you have to compensate for that. Also, if you're going to shoot with a pinhole, always use a tripod and try to always use a cable release. Your exposure is always going to be in multiple seconds, so trying to hold the camera steady and also the shutter release is just not going to work. You need to use a tripod and a cable release. Unfortunately, they don't make Holga pinhole cameras anymore. Holga went out of business, but the 120N is still made. Somebody picked that up. So if you do happen to get one, try and get one with this little doodad in the front that holds a cable release, and there's a hole there for the tripod mount. Again, you'll have to manually hold the shutter release down if you don't have one of these, and it subjects the camera to a lot of shake. I developed the film in Ilfosol 3, and here are the negatives. It looks pretty decent. There's a lot of contrast between lights and darks, and if you're not familiar with negatives, everything that is light is dark and everything that is dark is light. What you want to look for are some pretty reasonable midtones and grayscales all the way through. These are a little contrasty, but they don't look too bad. Here's some images developed from the negatives. As you can see, it's typical Pinhole and typical Holga. Very soft focus, skewed perspective lines. Using a Pinhole camera is just like stepping back in time. Very, very cool, like going back 200 years ago. This photograph could have been taken a couple hundred years ago. Kind of hard to tell the difference, except of course for the LED pancake lights here, and I like how soft they are. And if you take up Pinhole photography yourself and develop your own film, you'll be surprised how much latitude film has, how forgiving it is. You can overexpose it, you can overdevelop it, underdevelop it a little bit, and it'll still come out as a pretty decent image. Okay, now it's time to shoot with the Zero Image 2000 Deluxe Pinhole camera. As you can see, it's vastly better quality than the Holga. Still using a cable release and a tripod. It's really different going from a Holga to this since the shutter release is just absolutely silent. I metered 5.6 at 1/125th of a second, so if you look at 138, it says it should be an 8-second exposure. Here's kind of a trick that I use. Not really a trick, but just an additional tool. I find it very, very hard to read the exposure count, the exposure number in the little red window, especially on the Zero Image camera. So I take a little LED flashlight with me. Take a look here and see how small it is. You can see the 1 in there. It's on the first exposure. Very, very difficult to see, especially if you're not in direct sunlight. So I just use a little LED flashlight for both the Holga and this. This little viewfinder came with the Zero Image 2000. I like it, and it's handy so you're not flying completely blind when trying to compose a shot. Here's a negative from the Zero Image, and it's not as wide an angle as the Holga is. The image is definitely sharper than what the Holga produces, especially in the foreground. Here's a negative taken with the Zero Image a little farther back. And here's a positive image. Well, it looks pretty good. A little bit more detail than with the Holga. I photograph my negatives. I don't scan them in. To me, it's more of an art than a science, and there's a lot of advantages to photographing your negatives. I'll have a tutorial on how I do this and why I do this upcoming very shortly. Pinhole photography is kind of quirky, and you never really know what you're going to get. Like for example in this shot, if you look in the middle of the frame, there's a weird little light streak explosion going through this negative. Here's the positive, and you can see how these little rays of light emanate from behind the picture in the book. I think it came out looking pretty cool and was completely unexpected. So that does it for this shoot. Again, the Holga's on the left and the Zero Image 2000 is on the right. They're both really good Pinhole cameras. Of course, the Zero Image is built a lot better. They both produce really nice images, and again, with Pinhole photography, it's a whole nother world and you really never know what you're going to get. That's half the fun of it.